What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are First. Welcome in to another edition of the NFL Weekly here on the network. We break down everything the NFL has to offer, of course, from a gambling point of view, and it's time for Week 6 in the NFL. And when I say we, I of course mean myself and my friend and co-host Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing tonight, sir?
I am doing well. Woke up, let the dogs out last night, and they came back in wet, so that kind of startled me. But we got past it. If that's the biggest problem I have, I don't have any problems.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. I went out outside last night and same thing with the cat. Cat ran in, and at first I was like, "Oh gosh, what have you been rolling in?" And then look outside and go, "Oh, it's been raining." But yeah, as you said, uh, here in San Diego, not a whole lot to get complain about, especially weather-wise these days. But we are, of course, going to take a look at Week 6. We got 10 games to talk about, and of course, we are going to talk about our thoughts on the NFL through 5 weeks. But before we do get into that, it would be grossly negligent if we did not take a moment to acknowledge the occurrence and the absolute brutality that happened this past weekend in Israel. Look, we're not breaking any news. Unfortunately, it sounds like a high number of people and pretty much all civilians have been, killed, all of the above, unfortunately. But it's a situation that we're not the podcast that's going to break the stuff down or anything like that. It's a very complicated issue. Up until this weekend, I understand that. I don't know what the right answer is, but I know at the bottom of my heart what we saw this weekend was the exact opposite of what the right answer is. I can't really, offer anything other than, condolences and any support prayers. Please send them their way. Really, to the whole of the Middle East. Not great, unfortunately. Any thoughts, Raider Jim?
Yes, actually, to play on to that, I think I would like to interject and add this sentiment to the conversation. That is, we in the United States right now, right this very minute, and even before, we're divided. We have factions that are good, factions that are bad, factions that are their only goal is to go out and disrupt. And my point is, I don't want the other nations of the world to judge the United States on these factions that disrupt everything. The Palestinians are being held responsible for the attack, and they are. It is a faction of the Palestinians. It is Hamas, a militant group. Don't label the entire Palestinian nation. I'm not in agreement with anything that happened. The Palestinian people are basically also, to a degree, being held hostage by this militant group. So let's not label, as we labeled the Japanese during World War II, we labeled the Vietnamese during the Vietnam War, the Koreans during the Korean War. It happens. We're going to have enemies. We're going to look and say that person looks like the enemy. But let's give everybody a fair shake. By all means, those who carried out this atrocity need to be held accountable, and I hope they are in the most severe fashion possible, keeping in mind these hostages. So that's let's just all make sure we don't label an entire society because of the actions of one militant group.
Amen. And also to just opportunity, grab your loved ones, give them a hug, and really be incredibly grateful. If you're listening to this podcast, you more than likely lived a blessed life. If you have the time to listen to us to talk about football and you have the time to watch football, you lived a blessed life. And I know I have to remind myself that even on my absolute worst day, there are plenty of people who would gladly trade, and I wouldn't take that trade. So just wanted to take a moment to shed light on that. But with that being said, time to focus on kind of our expertise, or as close to we can get through
Yeah,
5
you're not
weeks.
living a blessed life if you're following our tips the last
Yeah,
3 weeks.
it's relatively, goodness gracious. And you know what? I'll tell you this right now. we make plenty of jokes. But we are two very intelligent football people. We've been playing the spreads and the over-unders for quite some time. Anybody that tells you they're hitting over 65 or 70% right now is
They're
either a
lying.
time traveler or lying. But yeah, it's been a crazy 5 weeks. And I think last week was a perfect little microcosm. Just the first two games of the weekend, we saw Chicago blow out or blow the doors off a Washington team that we thought, okay, the Commanders are turning a corner. Here they go. They get blown out. And then in London, we think, okay, the Bills are going to, really kind of turn themselves into maybe a contender to go against the Chiefs. And they get somewhat embarrassed by London's adopted team in Jacksonville. And then plenty of others. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts week 5 and really 5 weeks into this season that I feel like I have absolutely no pulse on?
Oh, it's kind of fantastic. At least I can always, I try to laugh at most of these things. Inconsistency is still the only consistent thing week in and week out for me. You just hit on those two games. The Chicago Bears. I just reread an article before we went on right now. One of the professional prognosticators who wrote last week about what a shoe-in Washington was. And I mean, but who didn't think that? There's a very, very small group that really felt the Bears were, maybe the Bears are going to cover. Bears aren't going to put it on Washington like they did. Really took advantage. They put it together for that one game, took advantage of the Washington defense, which really, they're not that good. The Washington defense isn't that good. Passing, they're 22, I believe. Overall, I think they're in the bottom 3. And the Bears finally put it all together. I guess it's been since last year or something like that, since they've won a game. And of course, you had to go with the storyline. That's because Dick Butkus was looking down on me. I mean, it just happened and it's the weird thing is that news broke that afternoon, and I was like, oh, I should change that pick because I think the Bears are going to win now. And sure enough, and these odd, strange things happen. They made reference on the Raider game about that Thursday night after Brett Favre's dad passed away, and he comes out and just lights up the Raiders secondary for 4 touchdowns in the first half or something like that. So, it's odd, call it what you will, but it did happen. That's one of the games. The one that's really standing out to me, though, when you look at the standings, at the end of week 5, the New England Patriots are 1-4. They have been outscored in their 4 losses 122-40. They were shut out last week to a subpar New England team. I mean, New England, New Orleans team, but shut out. They had 156 yards total offense against the Saints, who have a good defense. But my goodness, this is not the Patriots of the past. They are winless at home. I don't know what that fan base must be feeling right now. This is such foreign territory for them, even though they have not played that well the last couple seasons. This is another dimension for them to have to deal with. The other team, the other games, Buffalo, 388 yards, but they only had 29 yards on the ground. And that is not good. Jacksonville rolled up 474 yards, 278 in the air, 196 in passing. That was so well balanced. And that's, what a great game they put together. I like Trevor Lawrence, so I'm glad they had a good game. But that was just shocking to see that score. So at the end of week 6, or going into week 6, here we are. This will put us basically 1/3 of the way through the season. Going into it, we've got 3 teams that have no conference wins. Carolina, not a big surprise. They're 0-5, and so they have, and all 5 of those games, conference games. Yeah. They are really in a deep hole. Denver, 0-3 in the West. They're digging themselves into a deep hole, and they've got Kansas City tomorrow. And the real surprise, Cincinnati, no conference wins yet. Wow. What do you think about all that?
I will say I do think what we saw out of Cincinnati last week is a movement in the right direction compared to the other 2 teams you brought up. I think the hard part is for Denver and Carolina. Now, I know for a fact Carolina does not have their first round pick this year. I don't know. I would have to check it, but there's a chance that in that Russell Wilson deal, there was another first rounder this year as well. So that is kind of the one, I guess, like light at the end of the tunnel for bad teams is, hey, we're going to have, if it gets real bad, we're going to have a top 5 pick and hopefully get an opportunity to bring in a game changer. But like I said, for Carolina, they don't have that option. But like I said, I do think Cincinnati, at the very least, I saw what they were capable of. And yeah, I know it was against Arizona, but personally, I've been impressed with what I've seen out of Arizona. And I think that's mainly because of what they were billed to be in the offseason. I mean, like I said, I've said this multiple times, but I mean, we were told that this might be one of the worst teams of the decade. And they're not the worst team in the league, let alone of the decade. Going back to New England, you brought it up. I mean, if you're a Patriots fan and you're under the age of 25, you don't know what's going on right now. You look like the guy in Saving Private Ryan who's just kind of wandering around. You are so shell shocked right now that it's pretty crazy. I don't want to say I have pity for Bill Belichick.
No, I have no pity for him.
But at the same time, it's kind of like watching just, I don't know, it's almost like if Drago was the villain in the first like 6 Rocky movies. Like, okay, first 4 you're like, yeah, but by 5 and 6 you're like, God, why do you keep taking this fight? But it's pretty crazy. And my next question for the Patriots is, when is Bailey Zappi going to get meaningful snaps? Because if you think
like 4 last week or so, 4 passes.
Yeah, but by that point, I mean it's what, 34-0 or at least 27-0 by that point. He's not being brought in to change put them in a position to win. He's being brought in to, hey, this is getting ugly. We need to bring a fresh body in at quarterback. Obviously, the offensive line, I don't know what the statistics say, but might be one of the worst in all of football. And that's really the big difference. This season overall, I was thinking about it, and I love analogies. It's kind of like watching a syndicated television show on TV, but it doesn't go in chronological order. So you see one episode, that's 1 week, and the next episode, you're like, wait, when did they get together, and why are they mad at each other? And you just have no idea what's going on. I mean, it's the same show, but you're really confused at what the storylines and all that stuff is going on. But one person I did want to shout out, and I've been meaning to really the last few weeks when we do this, and it's Houston quarterback CJ Stroud, because I was not very high on any of the quarterbacks this draft class. And I if I had to rank them, I would probably put CJ Stroud maybe 3 or 4. And that's on me. He has been by far the best offensive quarterback this year. If it wasn't for Puka Nacua, I think he's probably going to be offensive rookie of the year. Now with Cooper Kupp coming back, I think CJ Stroud probably wins that, assuming he continues on this track. But the biggest thing for him is he's protecting the football. And look, Houston's 2-2. D'Amico Ryans has done a fantastic job down there. And maybe 2-3 now that I think about it. But fantastic stuff out of Houston. But I've been meaning to kind of give them a little bit of a shout out, because there are a lot of teams that are underachieving. We kind of just went through a lot, but you know what? Teams like Houston definitely deserve a little bit of shine. And we are actually going to talk about them later on in this one. Good matchup that we'll be talking about. But with that being said, it is time to dive into next week, and I take that back now that I look at the lineup. We are not talking about Houston. Sorry about that, but we did just right there. But anyways, as Raider Jim somewhat alluded to earlier, it is Thursday night football getting us rolling. It is an all AFC West matchup. And goodness, if you really think this league couldn't surprise you anymore, if Thursday night football goes the opposite of what we think, I just might quit altogether. But with that being said, Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Denver heading to Kansas City. The Chiefs are 10.5-point favorites. The over-under is 46.5. That did move a little bit. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Denver is in a world of hurt right now. As I mentioned, they don't have any conference wins. They only have 1 win, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're 1-3 right now, or 1-4. They were falling apart on the sidelines last week as well. Russell Wilson just is It's almost, you would think that this is early in his career, not at the end of his career. And it's really too bad to see that happening. Kansas City has been good, but they haven't been great. I have to be honest with you. I watch them and I know they're going to pull through. They're going to do what they do. They find ways to win. Mahomes continues to mature every week. And so he really maintains the composure and makes the plays when he has to. Not scared to run, still not scared to run, and still has a good stride about him when he gets the feet going. What's going to happen tomorrow? One thing that's going to happen is there's a 62% chance of rain, and the temperatures are going to be a little lower. So when I look at the spread, 10.5, I think I'm going to give Denver a half a point and go Denver plus 11 on this one if I want to cover the spread. And I'm going to take another half point because the over-under is 47.5. Give me Denver plus 11 because Kansas City was I believe they were a double figure or maybe 8 points last week. They pulled it off with a touchdown and they did not score in the fourth quarter. They did not score in the fourth quarter. So watch for Denver to, it'll be a combination of things. Kansas City is still, if Taylor's in the building, then that's going to distract from everything probably, whether they say it is or isn't, or she is or isn't. Denver plus 11, under 48.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I did not look that up, but I also kind of figured that if it was announced that she would be at the game, I hate to say it, but it would already been on my social media feed. So you feel free and go do your research on that side of it. There's a lot of me that wants to kind of just do the opposite of what makes sense because that's kind of what makes sense this year in the NFL. But Denver is that team. Denver has been honestly one of the most consistent teams this season for all the wrong reasons. We have a lot of teams that are very Jekyll and Hyde-ish. One week they look really good. The next week they look like they're not going to be able to beat anybody. Denver, I feel like, has shown me their true colors all season. Now, last week, obviously, it was a lot of things, but I do think, and something that kind of got by me when I was kind of handicapping this game was the Nathaniel Hackett situation. Obviously, Sean Payton this offseason said last year was the worst head coaching job he's ever seen in reference to Nathaniel Hackett's job with the Broncos. Awkward considering he's actually doing worse. But with that being said, Nathaniel Hackett is the offensive coordinator for the Jets. And I think for a lot of those players that look, they're going to stick up for their coach. They're not going to be able to punch Sean Payton in the face or this or that, but they can beat the heck out of his football team. And that's exactly what happened. I think Kansas City, like you said, they've been struggling. This is their kind of get right game. I feel like this is their opportunity. They're going into it going, look, let's blow the doors off this team. Let's get people talking about the Kansas City Chiefs and not Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. I think that's the key going forward for the Chiefs. So I'm going to buy a half a point just to go the other way. Give me Kansas City minus 10. But I do think we stay under here. Kansas City defense has been good. They haven't been great, but they've been good. And the rain, I think, does help as well. One other thing to kind of keep in mind, and this is just more of something to keep in your mind, not really for the gambling side of it, but the last 2 weeks, and I am not one to point fingers at referees or say this or that, it could have gone differently, blah, blah, blah. Now, there are obviously certain calls that are obvious, if that goes differently, something changes. But the Chiefs have been kind of bailed out. That game against the Jets, there were a lot of, let's say, questionable calls. And this past weekend against Minnesota, last play for Minnesota, there was a play, I think it was towards the end zone. Referee throws the flag. Defensive back thinks it's going to be on him. He actually takes his helmet off, which we all know is an immediate 15-yard penalty. They end up picking up the whatever, whether it was going to be holding, illegal contact, pass interference. They end up saying that didn't happen. Play stands, first down, Kansas City. Kansas City kneels on the ball. I don't know. That's a pretty obvious penalty, taking your helmet off. I don't know if there's a caveat that if you react to a penalty, but the penalty gets picked up, we forget that it ever happened, because I guess I could see that side of it. Once again, just something to keep an eye on. Believe me, there's plenty of people out there that will break this down even further and have much more strong opinions on this. I don't think it affects this game too much because I think Kansas City can get the job done regardless. But this is going to be one that I'll probably watch the first quarter just to see how this game is going to go. But we shall see if Denver can kind of step up to the table. But
and at the moment, Kelsey is still listed as questionable.
Thank
And
you.
his size, his age, he's not that old. I get it. He's not that old, but his size, and he was a little dinged up going into this year. I don't know if I want to risk his knee against the Denver Broncos.
And that's a great point that I kind of glossed over because I kind of forgot about that because he came back and actually scored a touchdown. So I guess in my mind, I'm like, oh, he's good. But you're right. Sunday into Thursday, is it worth it? I don't know. But yeah, that's something definitely you need to be thinking about for this one. So we are, of course, going to stay in the AFC West. This is an interesting one. It is the New England Patriots, or I think now we call them the Old England Patriots because they lost the Battle of the News last week. But it is the New England Patriots. They're heading to Vegas. They will be facing the Raiders. The Raiders are 3-point favorites here in this one. The over-under sits at 41. No one can get this started other than Raider Jim. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, let me tell you, the Raiders got a lucky one on Monday night. I don't care what anybody says. Raiders the defense is looking slightly better. They're not world beaters, but they're better than they were last year, just by that much. But here's the problem on the offensive side of the ball. They're still only averaging 18 points per game. That's not going to beat a lot of teams when you have a subpar defense. Garoppolo has 6 TDs, but he's got 7 picks. He's under 1,000 yards. He's not lighting up the AFC West when you look at some of the other quarterbacks they have, especially the two in front of him, Herbert and Mahomes. Josh Jacobs, the big holdout. I was on him last year. I'm on him again this year. At the end of 5 games, this guy's racked up 235 yards. He's averaging 47 yards per game and an average of 2.9 per carry, meaning if you put him on the 11-yard line and give him the ball 3 times, he's not going to get you a first down. Not what you need in a running back. You got to have somebody who can go out there, punish. I'm not sure what it is. You can't blame the offensive line entirely on this one. They had the most success when they brought in the fullback and let the fullback do a little leading for him on 1 or 2 plays. Anyway, not too much into that part of it. Against New England, best chance they've had. They couldn't ask for better circumstances. They're 2-3. They can get up to 500. They can get close to the Chargers, who are sitting 1 ahead of them. Chargers had the bye last week, so they're 2-2. I don't like what New England is doing. I already talked about the poor production on their offense, so the Raider defense may only need to be mediocre, which plays right into the Raider game plan. It's not going to be an offensive battle by any stretch. Does Vegas cover? I think Vegas does cover on this one. I'll take the 3 on that one. I'll leave the line by itself. I will take under 41.5 on this one is what I've got. So that's my take on that game.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I see this one 20-17 max. I think first to 20 wins, and we might not even get there. Yeah, just with these two offenses. And I also do like the Raiders. I think this is a game for the Raiders to say, look, we are the better team. Prepare to be the better team. Go out and get the job done. Full disclosure, I did not see Monday Night Football. Unfortunately, playoff baseball still somewhat clouds that side of it. But watching kind of the highlights and going through and just seeing like I said, I'm not going to say flow of the game, but the big plays, those highlights. One thing that did jump out to me, and look, Jordan Love is not a world beater, and there are going to be plenty of questions asked. But I like what I saw to the Raiders defense. I think, obviously, look, before last week, it was Max Crosby and everyone else. Max Crosby is fantastic. He is, I would say a top 10 defensive impact rusher, probably even top 5. Everyone else is just kind of there, and they definitely have some players. But I think this was the first time where he looked around and said, okay, I got some players here, or it's not going to be all on me. And I think that might help them going forward, especially against the offensive line that New England brings to the table. I think the Raiders get the job done here. The only thing that I do worry about on the over under is, some pick sixes or a scoop and score or some, 3 or 4 turnovers from New England that set the Raiders up in even Josh Jacobs a bull territory, if you will, there. So that would be the only thing I'd be worried about there. But I'm pretty confident Vegas is going to get the job done, and I think we're going to stay under. So we shall see. But moving to Monday night, this is the perfect little segue. Putting the rundown together, we're starting off chronologically an all AFC West matchup, and our final AFC West matchup, it's going to also be an NFC East matchup. So lead right into that. It will be Monday Night Football. The Dallas Cowboys, they're heading to SoFi Stadium. They will be facing the Los Angeles Chargers. Currently, the Cowboys are 2-point favorites, and the over-under sits at 51. Raider Jim, I'll give you the honors. Monday Night Football, Cowboys at Chargers.
Yeah, you used the term but a few minutes ago, referring to somebody shell-shocked. That was the Dallas Cowboys when they took on the 49ers. Let me tell you, we all thought, or you and I both thought, that's got the makings of a pretty darn entertaining game. And it was real entertaining if you were wearing gold and red that night, because those boys just took it to the Cowboys. And every time they did a shot on the sidelines, it just seemed like the Cowboy players couldn't figure it out. They might as well have just run question marks over their heads. There was no way they were going to figure that one out. But that was the 49ers. Chargers aren't the 49ers. The 49ers actually have a Bosa that plays week in and week out, and the Chargers don't. And I don't know if he's even back in the lineup this weekend. It seems like this is another season where sometimes he's there and sometimes he's not. And when he's there, he's not necessarily 100% for the whole game. So that being said, the Chargers offense is okay. They're making their plays when they need to. Dallas defense is going to come around on this one though, and I think they are going to show looks and pressures that are going to get to the Charger offense. Dallas is the road favorite on this one, as you noted. Dallas -2.5. I think that's very, very doable. And 50.5 for the over/under. Did you say 51?
Yeah, I think it moved just a little bit from yesterday, but that's what Bovada had today.
Yeah, I'm going to be surprised. I don't mind taking 51 and going under on that. I just have a feeling that both defenses, it's going to be, again, that combination thing. Combination of both defenses play fairly well, and both offenses don't fire on all cylinders.
Yeah, and Eckler has made it known he expects to play, but like you said, sometimes, at what capacity are we going to see Eckler? And, maybe is it better to just maybe hold him off for another week?
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of players, especially when it comes to bye weeks, they kind of look at it and go, look, I'm just going to play after the bye week regardless. It's kind of, I got my week of rest. Don't rest me again. But we'll see. I went back and forth on this one. This is a tough one. I really do think we're going to see some points being scored. I think we see a shootout. Two good defenses, yes, but I think for Dallas, their offense. Look, Dak. The fact that on a professional level, on an athlete level, he's a Cowboy, so I can't like him too much. But on a personal level, I think Dak Prescott is a hell of a human being from everything we've seen, that he portrays. I think he's a hell of a human being. He's done a lot for a lot of mental health and things like that. But I also do think he's a prideful human being, and he knows what's being said about him. I think he looks at this game and says, look, this is a game where I can it's going to be on national TV. NFL fans are very reactive. 1 week we say this, the next week something changes and we go 360 degrees. So I think he knows that, look, if I go out and put a good game forward, everything will kind of quiet down. So I do kind of finished with Dallas, but I am going to go money line just because I don't want to get, kind of with that. So give me Dallas money line. But I do like the over here. Like I said, I think we're going to see some points being scored. Justin Herbert's going to fling the ball all over the field. They're going to pull somebody in off of the at the parking lot. They're going to have to play wide receiver because unfortunately we know how the Chargers are. Mike Williams is going to be out for a bit. Very, very short at the wide receiver position, but Justin Herbert, I think, will score enough points to get us over that 51. But not terribly confident, but give me Dallas money line. So we are going to stay in the NFC East. It is my 5-0 Philadelphia. I got the Phillies game on the background, so I almost did it. But the Philadelphia Eagles, they are heading to the Meadowlands. They are going to be facing off against the New York Jets coming off their win at Mile High last week. The Eagles are 7-point favorites. The over-under sits at 40.5. I'll get this one started. First and foremost, going back to last week for the Eagles, I think that game in Los Angeles, that was, I think, their most complete game of the season. If the last kind of bit that we haven't really seen from the Eagles has been the red zone offense. The Eagles are top 5 in pretty much every offensive category. They are, I think, either 27 or 29 in red zone offense. That's not going to cut it against really good teams. Now, look, they've gotten the job done. And like I said, last week, really after the offense got out of one possession range, the game was essentially over because the defense took over. This defense, look, I know Jalen Carter had his issues and his question marks, but how did 8 teams let this man fall to the Eagles? Because he is going to be a problem for a very, very long time. I think it was there was a stat saying that since PFF started grading defensive tackles, he's the first to have 25 pressures, 5.5 sacks, and there was, I don't know the exact number for tackle for losses. He's the first player to do that in the first 5 games since Aaron Donald. And we're 5 games into this man's career. The sky is the absolute limit for him. I think Jalen Carter and this defensive line get after Zach Wilson. I think the Eagles, I don't know about the red zone offense. I'm not sure that finally clicks, but everything else has been clicking for the Eagles, and I think that is enough to get the job done. Hats off to the Rams last week. Their first drive, I was worried because they were hitting Cooper Kupp. It just seemed like they told Cooper Kupp, if you're on one-on-one coverage, just sit down somewhere. Don't run a route. Just find somewhere to sit down, and that's what he did. They went right down the field, but then the Eagles did make adjustments. We're dropping down in that when it comes to the Jets offense with Zach Wilson. And I do really like Garrett Wilson, but I don't think we see that fight in the Jets. Going to be a lot of Eagles fans at the Meadowlands as well. So give me the Eagles. I don't like to bet on my own team, but just for the sake of the podcast, I will buy a 0.5 point just to cover myself, -6.5. But I do like the over here. I believe the Eagles offense and their red zone offense takes a step forward. Therefore, I think the Eagles, look, I think the Eagles might get 38 points by themselves. At that point, all I need is a Jets field goal game. That might be a bit much because the Jets do have a very good defense. And personally, after what I've seen from the Jets the last 2 weeks, I think the Jets have a good chance to make the playoffs. I just think they're going to struggle this week. I think the Eagles are just too much right now. And then also too, I don't know if we need to call up the commissioner, but I think for posterity's sake, the NFC can continue to play. But the Eagles and Niners, we're going to, play that one game, figure out who gets home field advantage, and we'll skip ahead to the NFC Championship game because it's those two teams, a big drop, and then anybody else. You put whoever you want there. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Philadelphia at the Jets.
Just love the way the Eagles are playing. I will tell you, you look at this game, and as you said, Jets are playing good ball. I've been impressed when I've watched the Jets this year. They put together some real good moments during each and every game. Only thing in this game that I see that's going to impact both sides just a little bit, 36% chance of showers. So maybe it will, maybe it won't. It could be some on and off stuff, but it might be a little wet out there. I don't think that's going to slow down the Philadelphia offense. I think they're going to put points on the board, as you already said, and I agree with that. I think over 40.5 is not a problem. I think Philadelphia covering at -7 is not a problem. And unfortunately for the Jets, Yeah, this is not the defense they've run into the first few weeks of the season. So they're going to have a long night ahead of them out there in on the home field.
One thing I will say, and the Eagles haven't really fallen victim to this, at least under the Sirianni regime, or at least last 2 years. This is the quintessential trap game for the Eagles because next week they host the Miami Dolphins on Sunday Night Football. So I'm not saying they're looking ahead, but I'm looking ahead. Let me put it to you that way. I'm already ready to see what the Dolphins can do against this defense as well, but we will save that for next week. But just throwing it out there, definite trap game possibility for the Eagles. So keeping it in the NFC East, it is the Washington Commanders, a team we talked about a little bit earlier. They are heading to Atlanta to face the Falcons. The Falcons are 2.5-point favorites at home. The over-under sits at 42. We obviously talked about the Commanders and their kind of, I guess, come down to earth situation. Or, you could also say maybe they just showed us their true selves. That works as well. A lot of question marks, really all around, but I still have faith in Ron Rivera, Eric Bieniemy, and the defensive line for Washington, I think, is a lot better than what the defensive stats will show. Montez Sweat and Chase Young are really good tandem off of the edges. And of course, you have Ron Rivera, who's a fantastic defensive mind. I think the Commanders get the job done. I like them being underdogs here. Atlanta, look, not a huge, it's a dome, but it's not one of those where you go, or, a young quarterback going like you did with, New Orleans and the Superdome back in the day. So I don't think the home field advantage is a huge part here. So begrudgingly, just because for the sake of it, I will take Washington plus 2.5. I also really do like those plus 2.5 spreads. What can I say? This is more kind of harking to my horse racing side of things. This is a value bet. Just find some points between two teams that I really don't know what to expect from. Get some points from Vegas and move on. I do like the under here, though. I think we are going to see more of a slog offensively. If Atlanta does what they want, they're going to run the ball 55 to 60% of the time. And I think Washington will be okay doing that as well. So keep under 42. But yeah, I do like Washington plus 2.5. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Commanders at Falcons.
Pretty much read my mind because I think, as we said, consistency is the rule this year. If you can count on anything, so you almost have to go Olympic scoring for those first 5 games. Okay, take out the worst game Washington played. That was last week was it a fluke? We don't know if it was a fluke with Chicago, but pretty much nobody picked that game. This week it's going to be different. Washington's going to come out. I agree with you. The defense is going to be a little better than what the stats say. Atlanta's offense, good, not great. Washington, good, not great. But what's going to happen in this one? Give me a 0.5 point. I think Washington covers at 3. Give me Washington plus 3 on this one. I have 42.5 down. I think I'm going to keep it under 42.5 on this one. I'm with you. I think it's just, it's the game in the background. If you have to have football on Sunday and you're busy doing stuff.
Yeah. It's going to be, I think you got to be a diehard fan to want to tune in and watch this one compared to some of the others. But speaking of diehard fans, another game that you're probably going to need to be a diehard fan to watch, and it will be on national TV. But it is the New York Giants. They are at the Buffalo Bills. Currently, the Bills have a 14-point, or the spread is Bills minus 14. The over-under is 44.5. As I said, this is Sunday Night Football. The Giants remind me a lot of last year's Denver Broncos, where it seems like every other weekend we have to sit through another Broncos, Russell Wilson primetime game. Well, now it's Daniel Jones and the New York Giants. Now, I will say I think the Giants performed better than expected against the Dolphins. I don't know if they covered now that I think about it, but either way, it wasn't, as bad as we expected it, or at least I expected it. I'm going to take the Giants plus 14.5. And this is purely because of right now, I can't sit here and gamble and say the Buffalo Bills are 14 points better than the New York Giants. I just think the way the season is gone, outside of really Philadelphia and San Francisco, and I don't even know if Philadelphia is in that group, but San Francisco is an absolute house. They have pretty much been running on all cylinders at all times, all season. But everybody else, wildly inconsistent. So with that being said, give me the value, give me the points, as crazy as it is with the Giants. I do like the over here, and this is purely on the fact that, look, if the Giants are going to cover 14, they're going to have to score probably at least 17, and that will very easily get me the over. So give me, and I will buy a half a point as well. Giants plus 14.5, over 44.5. Raider Jim, your thoughts? Giants at Buffalo on Sunday Night Football.
Definitely like your cover the spread bet plus 14.5. Here's the reason why for me. 53% chance, and they're saying it's even going to be higher than that, of showers. When they say in weather, when they say the difference between rain and showers, it's going to be wet. You can almost guarantee it. That might be throughout the entire game. That means it's going to be all on the ground. And what we saw with Buffalo on the ground last weekend, they couldn't do it. I think, like I said, they had 29 yards or something like that. That might also play to an under in this game with the rain. So I'm going to take the Giants at 14.5 to cover the spread. I'm going to take another half point and go under 45 on this one. I think Buffalo's going to put it together. They're going to win. Won't be surprised if it's a blowout, but quite honestly, after the way they played last week against what I would call a mediocre team in Jacksonville, anything can happen this week. As you said, Giants actually played a little better against Miami than anybody thought they would, or at least than you thought, more than what I thought. So who says they can't come out and compete again this week? So 14.5, the Giants to cover, and under 45.
Yeah, it's going to be I hope it's a good game. I really do. But we shall see. I tell you what, if Buffalo stubs their toe here, I don't know. Rip up your notes, throw it away, and focus on horse racing. But anyways, moving on. It is the Seattle Seahawks. They are heading to Cincinnati. They are going to face the Bengals. Bengals are 3-point favorites here. The over-under sits at 45. Raider Jim, I'll give you the honors of this one. Seahawks at Bengals.
Everybody is still waiting for these professional prognosticators. They're still waiting for Cincinnati to turn that corner and right the ship and all those other terms that you use when you're talking about sports and life. Seattle's going to cover this one. Give me a half point on this one. I think Seattle's going to come out. Pete Carroll's going to have a great game plan. His defense is going to have a great scheme. They're going to get it, Burrow. He's not going to have all the time he needs. Seattle covers this one at 3.5. Over under the weather, 26% chance of rain. Might make a difference, but I don't know. At 45.5 is the spread that I see in right now, or the over under right now. I would say I would go over because I think Seattle is going to put up points. Cincinnati's going to put up points. They're just not going to put up enough.
I'm in agreement with you on the over. I do think we see some points being scored, especially if that weather kind of holds out a little bit, because I think both of these, or at least for Cincinnati, they're going to have to be successful going through the air. And they finally got Jamar Chase going, and that's good for them. It's good for me finally, because Jamar Chase, my fantasy team, my number 2 overall pick, I can finally go, okay, finally had 1 week where he was better than Christian McCaffrey. But, in terms of this matchup, Seattle is a team that seems to be kind of right in the middle. They could be a playoff team. They could lose 12 games. And I don't know if this week we're going to kind of see which way they're moving. I do like Cincinnati in this one. I think Cincinnati kind of finally they felt good. They, handled their business last week, and obviously not against a, terribly impressive opponent. But I think they take a deep breath and they look at their division as well and know, look, we're not, excuse me, chasing a 5-0 team, this or that. The division's pretty much wide open still. And I think they know if we handle our business against these lesser teams, we'll be just fine when it's all said and done. I expect them to get the job done, but at the same time, I still do kind of feel like that analogy I used a few weeks ago of I'm the violin player on the Titanic, just playing. I'm not finding a lifeboat. I'm going down with the ship, and that's kind of how I feel like I am with Cincinnati. So hopefully that iceberg is not immediate situation for them. But moving on to another one of these teams that it seems like we see them play so well and then just struggle. But it is the Detroit Lions. They are at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Detroit is 3.5-point favorites, and the over-under is 44. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Lions at the Buccaneers.
Well, I just get excited anytime a team executes a great flea flicker, and Detroit did it last week. It was textbook. And what I mean by that is if you watch the Raiders try to do it on Monday night, Jacobs couldn't even get the ball back to Garoppolo, and it just ended up being a 2-yard, 3-yard loss. Anyway, I digress. Detroit looked really good last week. Tampa Bay, they're that team though. That's the boxer. When you get in the ring, you better really train because you don't know if they're going to come in flat or if they're going to come in on their toes and be able to nail you a couple times and put you on the ropes. I don't think that will be the case this time, but still, it's one of those games. Detroit, Tampa Bay is always that. Tampa Bay, I think, is going to come out, have a fair success on offense, but I think the Detroit defense is really going to take over on this one. And I think the Detroit offense is just going to continue to be consistent, take care of business on that. I'll take Detroit covering at -3. And I'm going to even say, I see 43.5 as the over under. I think they're going to go over because I think Detroit's going to score some points.
I agree on both of those. I think Detroit overall has been more consistent. And if I do remember correctly, Tampa Bay, I think, was on a bye week last week. So I think the last time we saw the Buccaneers would have been when the Eagles beat them, but I could be wrong. But and they didn't look great on that Monday night.
Right,
and I think
correct.
Okay, perfect. So it was kind of the first time Baker Mayfield didn't play terribly well. And look, it is the Eagles defense, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a fan, but you can, like you said, the Olympics scoring, you can kind of throw that out. Detroit, though, I still feel like this team is going to put their best foot forward. Dan Campbell, we made a lot of jokes about his press conference and things like that, but this guy gets it. And at the very least, this team is playing for him, and whatever he is doing, he always makes me chuckle. Some of the best press conferences you'll see after a game, but give me Detroit. I think Goff has been playing well as well. The offense is really, really humming. I think the big thing with that flea flicker is it's a great microcosm for a lot of these teams because a lot of these teams don't have an offensive line to essentially stall for 3 seconds. And when you talked about that Josh Jacobs, not being able to get it back, the 3-yard loss might have been the best case scenario because if he does try and lateral that ball back, it ends a lot differently. But anyways, it's going to be, I think, Detroit getting the job done. Give me that half point. Give me -3. But I do think we do see some points being scored. Do you happen to have the weather up for them? Is Tampa, you're probably more worried about heat than anything else.
No weather.
Perfect. There you go. All right. Moving, while going across the pond, it is the Baltimore Ravens. They will be facing the Tennessee Titans. The Ravens are 4-point favorites. The over-under here is 40.5. I'll get this one started. One thing that I believe you touched on last week, Raider Jim, when we were talking about that Jacksonville-Buffalo game, was the fact that Jacksonville had been there the week before, and they were there, they were acclimated.
Bravo.
And even after that game, pretty much every Jaguar player said, I felt so much better this week than I did last week, blah, blah. And if I'm a Bills fan, I'm feeling a little slighted because that almost feels like a competitive advantage. But the reason I'm bringing that up is I think it all really comes down to who handles the travel best. Because look, at the end of the day, I think even if that game's in Jacksonville, I don't think Buffalo loses. And maybe I'm just naive or this or that, and I'm giving too much credence to the fact that Jacksonville was there the week before, but so I really do wonder who's going to handle the travel more. I'm going to take Tennessee here, and this is a pure reason why I go back to kind of why I took Washington and some of. I don't know what to expect out of Baltimore. I mean, Baltimore looked like they were going to just dominate Pittsburgh, and they really kind of did dominate Pittsburgh, and they lost the game. Tennessee, on the other hand, looks like they might not be able to get out of their way offensively, and they go out and get the job done last week. So I don't know what to do with either of these teams. So I'm just going to take the points. Give me Tennessee, especially +4. You keep me out of field goal range. Another thing that was brought up was how concrete was what I heard as the analogy for the turf at I believe it's Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and that's where this game's going to be as well, I believe. So keep an eye on that. In terms of the over-under, I do like over 40 and a half. I do think we will see some points being scored. Not a ton, but 40 and a half for Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. I think they'll be able to get their teams to do what they need to do to cover that 40 and a half. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Baltimore versus Tennessee in London.
Yeah, Baltimore, what happened last week, I mean, I did not, another one of those games. I didn't think that was going to be the end result. Tennessee, same thing, though. Did I think Tennessee was going to go out and only score 16 points against the Colts? And no, I didn't think that was going to happen. And they got shut out in the last quarter, which pretty much was their doom because they lost by 7 points. This week, I think it's going to be different. They're at home. They're going to be acclimated. They're going to want to put on a better performance. They've had time to regroup. I'm going to take Tennessee 4.5 on this one, +4.5. And I'd also like the over. I think we're going to go ahead and see some points here. So did you say 40.5 or 41?
40.
40. Oh, yeah, then definitely all day long, give me the points. Or give me the over on that one.
And apologies. Thank you for correcting me because I don't know why, but I always get the Titans and Colts mixed up. It's AFC South blue and white teams. They always get mixed up. They played last week. So I'm like, oh, yeah, Tennessee won. And then you brought that up, and I was like, no, that was another Uncle Rico coming in and getting the job done. Gardner Minshew in relief of Anthony Richardson. But yeah, I still do like Tennessee +4. Moving on to our final game of the week, and one that's kind of a weirdly intriguing game. I don't think it's very it's not the game of the week, but I think we're going to learn a lot about these teams in this one. It is the Minnesota Vikings. They are 3-point favorites as they head to Chicago to face Justin Fields and the streaking Bears. Yeah, 44.5 is the over-under. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Vikings at Bears.
Well, my first thought is it's the Windy City. It's going to be very windy off Lake Michigan. Also, 48% chance of showers. And if you've ever been in Chicago, when it's cold, windy, and rainy, not a pleasant place to be, let alone play football. Here's the difference. What we saw last week out of Chicago was a fluke, as I mentioned too, and before we started talking about the matchups for this week. They win against the defense that is not the greatest in the land. The stats don't do Washington justice, but at the same time, in some areas, they represent them very well. Minnesota is not the Washington defense. They're going to shut down. It's going to be unfortunately, back to Chicago starting the losing streak again. And then Minnesota, I think, is going to play a fine game. They're not used to the inclement weather anymore because they play in the dome, but they're going to come into Chicago, put together a great game. Do they cover 2.5? Yes, they do. Over under at 44.5 with that rain. I think I'd take a 0.5 point and go under 45 on this one. I don't see it being a very good game as far as offense goes because of weather.
Yeah, the weather definitely, just hearing that kind of, maybe gives me pause for concern because I actually like Chicago here in this one. And once again, we go back to a few weeks ago. I was, that's where the Titanic analogy originated was, me with Justin Fields. I'm not ready to get off the boat. I did look for a lifeboat last week before the game and then, maybe saw that there weren't any open or whatever. And I just went back to my post. I'm back to, playing out the song as the ship goes down. A big part of this too is there's a lot of talk about Minnesota, and it's not about this week or what's going to happen on the field or anything like that. It's about who will be here post trade deadline. Danielle Hunter, one of their best defensive weapons, he's more than likely going to be traded. Even I've been hearing Kirk Cousins.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's probably only a few teams, mainly, financially, that can pick up that contract, but also that are, looking around going, yeah, Kirk Cousins really pushes us over the limit. So that's something to also keep in mind. Trade talks are a little different than they are in baseball, because baseball, it's just like, it's so like common knowledge that certain players are going to be trade pieces. But the Kirk Cousins definitely got me going. The other part of this that gives me pause with Chicago, with Minnesota, Justin Jefferson's on IR. He will be out for at least a month. And that's, I don't want to say their only offensive weapon, because I do like TJ Hawkinson, but that's a huge weapon to lose. But with that being said, not terribly confident taking Chicago, but I will buy a half a point, get me out of that field goal range, give me a +3.5. I am going to switch my pick, though. I do like the under here. If you're talking about 55% chance of showers, and as you said, the Windy City, that's going to be sideways rain, and that's not fun.
And I believe they even said possible lightning, and that's could be that situation where they delay the game, and guys sit in the locker room and get frozen muscles, and yeah.
That's the situation where you're watching Red Zone or whatever, and they go to delay, and you forget all about it, and maybe in the fourth quarter of the afternoon games, they start that game up, and it turns into a kind of a bonus primetime game. But that'll be definitely interesting to keep an eye on. But I'm gonna keep riding with Justin Fields, for better or worse. I just don't think the Kirk Cousin iceberg is enough to get me off of this ship, but we shall see. With that being said, time for some final thoughts. Raider Jim, what do you got?
Let's see if this ship rights itself and things go back to normal, and we get to a 60+% on our picks for this week.
60 plus. I'm just trying to get into the green. just have a plus day. But obviously, made a lot of notes about how crazy the week the season has been, and very frustrating for us gamblers and things like that. But at the same time, it is a big reason why I think I love football, especially the NFL. Expect the unexpected. Even before this season, it was always a league that was full of parity. And we saw the Niners and Cowboys play this past Sunday night, and they were doing a lot in the pregame, doing a lot of like flashbacks to the late 90s, where these two teams were essentially in the NFC Championship game every single year. And as great as it was for those fan bases, I think for the NFL as a whole, it wasn't great, because, outside of the Packers, and the Packers were there as well with Favre, but there really it was those two teams, maybe the Packers, nobody else in the NFC. And I think now we're getting a situation where it seems like every conference championship, championship Sunday, we get a team that went, wow, how are they here? Look how crazy that this team is here. And while it might hurt our wallets, I think it really does keep us entertained. But so just enjoy the ride. It's going to be a little bumpy. No doubt about it. And like I said, anyone who's saying they're shooting over 70% right now is either a time traveler or lying to you. But with that being said, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the NFL Weekly, presented by the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench, but we are first. It's time for y'all to go wash your hands, and please, please, please stop hating everybody. We'll talk to y'all very soon.
Be good humans.